saying you were gardening.
Yes, I've got quite a big garden. There's a lot to do. And I've turned my sitting room has become a working space. I've moved all my furniture and all my carpets, so I rehearse there each day, and I'm rehearsing for the new group performance, which of course it's a bit strange to be rehearsing a group performance by yourself. And then because of the sunshine, I spend quite a lot of time in the garden. And then there are millions of emails and Zooms to answer to keep me busy the rest of the time.
Wonderful. So what are you planting? What are you growing?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of plants that are there from before. So it's discovering them under the weeds. At the moment, I've got the forsythia in flower, which is very beautiful.
Nice.
The broom is coming up. Magnolia is about to flower.
Oh, wow.
It's spring, yes.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to share this with the members of my team.
Yes.
And would you just say a few words about who you are? I will attach a bio about your wonderful work over the years. But just this is going to be a very informal conversation, Julia. And what I'm doing is that we are doing this project, and I am talking to various artists around the world to see how they are coping, how they are reacting to the virus, to this new reality, and what is the role of the art, and whether or not the art, and also the other point that we are investigating is whether there has been, due to the reaction of the different administrations around the world, whether there has been any negative impact on human rights. So this is really what we are working. And we hope that to create a documentary out of this, and then through these conversations, create a text for a play, a performance. So if you wouldn't mind just spend a couple of minutes introducing yourself to members, because some of my members of the team are not theater people. Some deal with human rights, other with communication. So it's a group of diverse people among artists, but also social scientists.
Right, Julia Varley. I was born in the United Kingdom, but lived there only the first 3 years of my life, then moved to Italy, where I did my school. And then in 1976, I joined Odin Teatret in Denmark, where I have been since. I work as an actress with Odin Teatret, and for myself, I also work as a director with various people around the world. And I write articles, some books, mostly about acting technique. I am director of the Transit Festival, which is a festival of women in contemporary theatre, which is connected to the Magdalena Project, which is a network of women in theatre, which has existed since 1986. And within these activities, I also am the editor of a journal called The Open Page.
Wonderful. So you're very busy, eh?
Yes.
And so, well, the first thing is that as an artist, okay, what is happening in Denmark? So that we hear it from you guys instead from the news. Because one thing that we may have realized is that the contact and getting news directly from the sources may be a good idea now. So what is happening in Denmark?
My mother lives in Naples, in Italy.
Okay.
And one of my brothers lives in Milan. So and also we were supposed to go on tour in China,
Oh my.
Iran, and Italy. So we knew about this coronavirus very much from the beginning because of the countries that suffered it mostly in the beginning. And in the beginning, like many people, we sort of said, oh no, but it's just a flu, it's okay, we can manage. And I was getting a lot of calls from Italy, from friends saying, please take it seriously. And they were crying, which made me realize, okay, we've got to take this seriously. We were finishing a workshop at Odin Teatret, so we had 20 participants. And this was, the last day was Thursday, and that was the same day in which the Prime Minister in Denmark said, now we're going to lock down the country. So it happened very fast. And in fact, we've got two of the participants that are still at Odin Teatret because they did not manage to leave. Both of them live in the United States. They are at Odin and can't leave. So it went like the decision and the implementation was very fast. We were told on the Thursday, and already on the Friday, a lot of things were closing. And then on the Monday, everything closed. What was incredible for me, used to the Italian politics, was to see how the Danish government, which at the moment is a social democrat, after very many years of the conservative party, which is called left, believe it or not. But what was incredible was to see the unity that our Prime Minister managed to create with all the parties, so opposition and government parties working together, but also the workers' organizations, the trade unions, and the owners, the people that have factories and workplaces. It's like they managed to get together and give a very united message, which I think meant that a lot of the Danish inhabitants reacted very well and reacted with a feeling of solidarity, of unity, of belonging, like a feeling of belonging together. There was a lot of talk of samfundssind, which is the society, I suppose, is the right, but samfund is the fund together. So the word itself is quite different from society. And so it was the feeling of society. One was talking a lot about that, as if it was a collective feeling of responsibility. What they talked about a lot in the beginning was to not create the same situation that had been happening in Italy. So to allow the health system to cope. So they turned many of the hospitals into intensive care units. They trained a lot of nurses and doctors that usually were not meant for intensive care for intensive care. And they stopped all other not necessary operations. So the whole health system went over to dealing with this crisis. Now, this was the 13th of March, so we've been locked down more than a month. We are going to be in general lockdown until the 10th of May. And it has been said that events with more than 10 people, public events with more than 10 people, cannot happen until the 31st of August. This is mostly because in the summer here in Denmark, there are a lot of music festivals and sport events, which gather really thousands and thousands of people. And they were asking what is going to happen. But since that communication was given 2 weeks ago, then the numbers and the famous curve has become much better. So they have began opening again, and they started with the kindergartens and this school for children up to 10 years old, with saying that children are not so vulnerable to this, and also that mostly young children have young parents, so it should not be such a big problem for them, and to give them the possibility, to give the parents the possibility to go back to work. Since we sort of have press conferences come every 3-4 days, sometimes with the Prime Minister, sometimes with the Health Minister, and now they're saying that the numbers are even better than they expected. So they've opened driving schools, hairdressers, tattoo shops,
Wow.
massage, dentists. But they have given a whole lot of indications of what should happen in all these places, so how people should behave, and they have to clean things. You know, if the hairdresser, every time they finish with the client, they've got to disinfect all the combs and brushes and basins and everything that they've used. And also in the schools, they've had to create much more space. They've asked most schools to try and work as much as possible outdoors. But then there are discussions like mothers that would start their very small children in kindergartens. The mothers usually spend about a week together with the child in the kindergarten to get the child used to being at the kindergarten. And this is not possible now. So the organization of the mothers has asked for the time of leave to be longer, to have 3 months more than one usually has, so that the mothers with very small children that would start into kindergartens should not start now, but wait. There have been many packets, they call them here, help packets, which means that the government is paying 75% of salaries if the firms don't make people redundant. They have to promise to keep the people at work, and since they send them home, saying they're going home, but they receive the 75% from the government, and the firms have to promise that when all of this finishes, the people will be back at work. There has been some help for culture because this 75% rule only applies for those who earn more than 50% of their income. So theatres that have government support for more than 50% cannot apply for this. Odin Teatret earns more than 50%, so we have applied and we've got it, which means that a good deal of our people are sent home and are supposedly not working because they get this support. Well, some of us keep on working because we have to show that we keep on existing. And I am one of those that is working, but of course we're working from home because the theatres are closed. One is not supposed to be at the theatre. What is very different in Denmark from, I think, other countries, it's certainly Italy, is that we can move. I mean, we can go shopping wherever we want. We can go to the sea. We can go to parks. The only thing is that one must not have groups of more than 10 people. And one is supposed to keep a distance of 2 meters, one from the other. You are supposed to wash your hands once an hour or something like that, and to sneeze in your elbow. Children are supposed to choose with what children they should play and try and keep to the same ones and not play for a long time, try and keep the time down a bit. So in the first 2 weeks, I think the biggest problem was for people having children at home and really being occupied 100% of the time in dealing with the children, which of course they're not used to doing. So that has been a big change for many. And it's all the question of authority towards children, it changes in a situation like this, because usually it's the school, the teachers who maintain a certain discipline, and at home parents tend to be more liberal. And now it's like the parents have had to take on some of the discipline elements. But I imagine that there's a lot of television and computers, games and films and things going on. But also, I mean, we're lucky in Europe because we're going towards spring and summer. So just being outside, I mean, it must be very different for somebody who lives in a flat, who only has 1 bathroom and maybe 2 rooms and 3 children, from somebody who's living out in the countryside. It's very different conditions. And they're starting now to test much more. Before, they would test only those who were working in the health system or with old people homes. And now they've said, I don't know if it's actually happening because it's a lot, they said that they're going to test anybody who has the slightest symptoms. There's a lot of infection in Copenhagen, the region around Copenhagen. but also in Holstebro, which is the biggest town where Odin Teatret have been quite a lot of infections, because there was one person who was in hospital who had the test and it resulted negative, but in fact he was with the coronavirus. So then he infected the whole department of the hospital, and of course that had consequences. But I would say that it is quite under control in Denmark.
Wonderful. So, Julia, you have described a new life.
Yes.
So, how is the artist relating to this new life or new way of living in this moment that Corona is alive? And so we can talk about this, because then I'm interested. For me, talking to you and to a member of the Odin Teatret, that you are the avant-garde of the work worldwide, is try to get some leadership, some advice, some to understand what you are doing. So how is the artist, how you are coping with this new reality as an artist, and whether this new reality is creating some ideas, some thoughts about the future work that you may be doing. And again, our challenge is always performance is always live performance, right? We need an audience. So this is another challenge. So.
Well, and there are lots of things to answer here.
I know.
One is that with our performances, we tend to be a bit of a Cassandra, in the sense that many times our performances deal with themes that then become reality afterwards.
Uh-huh.
And right now, our filmmaker, Claudio Coloberti, and Eugenio Barba, our director, are working on a film of Ur Hamlet, which was a performance which we did in 2006 and then in 2009, and which deals with the plague.
Right.
The plague invading the castle. And the plague was performed by Akira Matsui, a no actor with a mask, and very, very strong. And there was like an army of foreigners that invaded the castle of Hamlet. So it's like the themes have existed from before, and then you see them coming out into real life, and it's strange to recognize things which you have been working on before. So
let me interrupt you one second. So what you are saying is that this reality is really not new, because the arts have already dealt with this kind of reality, and now what we are living is something that has been forecasted to us by, in this case, or Hamlet.
But I mean, forecasted is maybe a bit strong, because it's not as if we're saying this is what will happen, but we deal with the theme and then it happens. I mean, the Chronic Life, which is another performance which deals a lot about immigration. It was taken, we started working on it a long time before Denmark started closing towards immigrants, and then we had the great flow of immigrants coming from Syria, from some African countries, from Afghanistan, and all of this came after we had made the performances. Like, you suddenly look at your performances and understand that they're talking about a reality that is happening and that we didn't know about when we worked on it, but obviously some part of us knew of it from before. That is one. The other is when we decided, okay, everybody is going home, we're shutting the theater, One of the first things was to be very present online. So we've been putting a lot of the material from our archives online, but we've also been making films that show what we are doing right now. The only thing that Eugenio asked us not to show anything of the rehearsals for the new performance. So we've been doing either things of training or saying poems, or but I must say that I personally am a bit tired or bored with all, because there is an invasion of things which are being put on internet, or either through Facebook or through WhatsApp or Zoom. And I find it's too much. It's just, one could spend the whole day just looking at a screen, and I don't want to do that. What I've also found, which is for me strange, is I've always said and written a lot that I have always enjoyed the moments in which I worked at the theatre when the theatre was on holiday, because then I could be alone in the room, nobody was around, and I could take all the time I wanted and really follow the process without having to think about results in any way. But when I am forced to do that, I suddenly discovered that it's not so nice. It's like I discovered that my concentration doesn't work in the same way. It's like something of it not being a free choice changes very much how you deal with what you do. But I had to do one of these videos about what I was doing, and a lot of people around the world had been asking me for encouragement and what could I tell them. And so what I said was, we should use this period to prepare. I mean, the importance of theatre is meeting, is relationship, is being in the same room and the same time with other people. So if we can't do that, it's like the sense, the meaning of theatre disappears. But what we can do is prepare for the meeting, when the meeting will be possible. It's not that you can find a new meaning of theatre in isolation, because the meaning of theatre is relationship. But definitely you can use the time to prepare, which means training, preparing new material, making scenes, working on a performance, reading and writing. Now, there again, I also find myself a bit in contradiction, because I found that in this situation, what I need is to do. I've seen a lot of messages of spirituality and sort of looking inwards, and that does not apply for me at all. I need to do, which means that I first cleaned all my house. My house has never been as clean as it is at the moment. Then I've been gardening, and then I've been training, dancing, learning music, rehearsing, so doing things. That has been my way. I would say that the first 2 weeks were much harder than now. I don't know if it's because of the sunshine. Could be. I mean, sunshine does help a lot. My biggest problem has been worrying about my mother, who is 87 and is alone in Naples, and I can't go and see her. I was supposed to be down there for some work now, and then she was going to come back to Denmark with me. So that, that also takes time, because it means that instead I'm calling her every day, something which I didn't do before, to try and keep the mood up, which she does also, because she doesn't want me to worry. But that kind of worry has taken a much more priority place in my thoughts. And so the connection with the family, connection with friends, we had some talks in the beginning, how we react to this situation, what are we doing? But then I think many of them are beginning to feel what I also feel, that we don't want to spend our time on telephones or on internet, on WhatsApp, and we try to limit that. So the strangest thing is not being able to have a future. You can't plan anything. We had, as I said, a tour to China, to Korea, to Italy, which have been cancelled. We had an Odin Week festival in Spanish in April. We had one which was going to start in August. We had an Easter session. We had the laboratory in Farah Sabina, where we met in June. We had an Eurasian theatre session in Palermo, in Italy. And we had the festive week, the big festival that we do in Holstebro, was supposed to happen in June. All of this has been postponed. Now, the big things we've postponed a year, because who knows? But a lot of the smaller tours were sort of wondering, can we do them in the autumn? Can we not? And you can't think about the future, because it's useless. I mean, you make plans, you know that you'll have to change them. So one sort of waits for the next press release, or for the next decisions, the next indications we have to follow, to find out what we will be able to do. If we, on the 10th of May, can start working again with the rehearsals, and Eugenio is already wondering what it will mean for our rehearsals, that we have to keep 2 meters distance between the actors, which might bring to new solutions and new possibilities. But yeah, giving up the future for the moment is also quite hard, I find.
So in this future that we need to give up, how do we live the present as artists? You said that you have been very busy cleaning your house, doing the garden, talking to your mother, and also you said rehearsing. You said you are rehearsing also the piece that you were working with Eugenio and the company, but also you are rehearsing some new work, right?
Yes.
So I am interested in this new work that you are rehearsing. Not, you may not want to talk about this specifically, I understand that. But if you will, I am interested in what kind of work are we creating now, in this moment? Because it should be indicative of how the artist is relating with the situation. And was that clear?
I don't think it's indicative of the themes, in the sense, the work that we're doing now, which is the new ensemble performance, we have already been working a couple of months. So there are various themes which have come out before this coronavirus came. One of them has to do with languages that die. There are the number of languages is going to be reduced very strongly in the next years. So what happens when a language dies? That is one theme. Another theme is a happy love story, because we, as actors, we were saying to Eugenia, you're always dealing with themes of war and oppression, and so we wanted to have something happy, and he said, yes, okay, fine, bring me happy love stories. And of course, all the love stories that came were terribly dramatic, because to be interesting, they usually are dramatic. There's something terrible that happens at some point. So these have been, and I have been working on a character. So what has happened is that I've had a lot of time to work on some texts which I already had been given. So to develop how to say them. And also having a lot of time to work on some of the musical pieces. So being able to work on things which are musically more complex, because one has much more time. So you know that, okay, you can learn a line today and a line tomorrow, and it's not as if you have to go back into rehearsals with everybody else, and what you know, and there's not much time to develop. So there's much more time for the individual research, or the individual possibility to go deeper into something. But you have to be careful not to get bored, in the sense of not to, because you're missing the feedback, or you're missing the relationship with the others, or what happens when what you've created by yourself is put together with other people. So it's, you need to keep alive a meaning in what you're doing. So in part imagining it in the context of the group performance, or in part maybe thinking, okay, maybe out of all the material that Eugenia will eventually cut, you can make another solo performance. But I've just finished another solo performance, which has not had many occasions to be shown. And so it's important for me to keep that alive. And that is also something that I rehearse in my room, in my sitting room.
So am I to understand now that what you're using the time to kind of finishing up some of the work that you have started in the past? Now that
Yes.
you have you have some time for yourself to do that.
Yeah.
So maybe it may be too premature to talk about how this moment may be affecting the artist, because that means it needs more time to be digested. Is that something that
Yeah, you have to see what happens when this is then put back into the context. Because if we're working on a performance with 6 actors, all the 6 actors are working by themselves at home. I mean, they might go in completely opposite directions. What happens when we then get back together and put it together again? I mean, it might be fantastic and might give very surprising results. It might be terrible, and you can't get dialoguing in common. I mean, a lot of things can happen afterwards.
Julia, this can happen to society as a whole, right? We have all in our houses, rehearse something, and once we go out, who knows what happens? Could that be?
Well, I had the image that because one of the things I had to cancel was a visit of Théâtre du Centaure, which are the theatre that works on horses, and they were going to come to Holstebro. And so I said to them, when we get out of this corona, it will be like horses suddenly let out on the fields after a winter in the stables. But I think we're going to be let out a bit at a time, in the sense that, you know, we're going to put out a leg and then an elbow and then the nose and then the... So we're not going to have this feeling of sudden freedom. I think it's going to happen little by little. It's like, of course, people can still go shopping now, but they have to keep at a distance, and that this distance will probably be kept for quite a long time, depending on when they find the vaccine and all the rest of it. So we're not going to suddenly get out of this situation. We're going to get out of it slowly. And what is incredible is to see how human beings get used to situations as extreme as this one quite quickly. But I mean, we know this from the wars and from the concentration camps, and people get used to the most terrifying conditions really quite quickly. So I don't think we're going to suddenly feel, we're free and back again where we started. Everybody's saying we will not go back to how it was for a very, very, very long time. I'm very curious when they're going to start opening the borders, right, and when airplanes will start working. I mean, I saw a picture which showed that in Europe there are sort of 10, 20 flights in the air. Well, the United States still has a lot, right, in comparison. But in Italy, there was not one flight at the moment in which they took this photograph. So situations are also quite different in different countries. And there, when you're talking about human rights and the consequences, I think is very different in Denmark, Hong Kong. There's just been a lot of arrests in Hong Kong. Right. And you know, what are they going to do? Because they can't march out in 2 million people like they did before. So what will happen? And talking to a lot of people that we know in China, when they had the lockdown, a lot of them were very, very depressed because it's like they have a double lockdown. When you are living a political situation which is a lockdown, and then you get a personal lockdown on top of that, it's very different than when you live in Denmark and like you're told to stay at home, but you can go out if you want to. And anyway, you know that it's a democracy, and so certain things can be discussed. Countries like Ecuador or India, you know, where the people are told to wash their hands and they don't have water, or they're supposed to stay at home, they don't have a home. Of course, it's completely different conditions to what we are living in our societies.
Right. So what any thoughts of what we're gonna do next? Just wait for a future that we don't know, and especially for the artists, in sense of what is our role, because I think it's very important. But I hear that art is not essential, because here in America we talk about the essential workers, right? Who are the essential workers? And of course the artists, they are not essential. I would disagree with that.
Yes. I mean, there's been a theatre in South Italy, Teatro Correia, who has made a quite strong declaration about the fact that we are health workers, because we work with the mental health. And with a lot of these lockdowns, I mean, I think also the politicians have been thinking about where is the balance between the coronavirus health, the economic health, and the mental health. There's been a lot of discussion because of the old people here in Denmark, in the old people's homes. They've not been allowed to be visited from their family members, which of course for people that are suffering of dementia is terrible, because they don't understand. And also dealing with my mother, she's been told she's not allowed to go out of the house because she's old.
Wow.
And I know how important it is for her mental health to be able to go for a walk. She lives quite close to the sea, so she used to go to the sea. Now she can't go to the sea because the park has been closed. But this balance between the health, because you're not supposed to get the virus and die from it, and the mental health of not going completely berserk, I think is very important. And of course, that is where we as artists are the professionals which are dealing with the feelings, the inner side of people, the relationships, the humanity of human beings. And the question is, is a life worth living in isolation, completely alone, without seeing family members, without seeing friends, without having any relationship? They say this is like this because they reckon it's for a certain amount of time. But if it was forever, it's not worth it. I think it's better to die, but to be able to see your closest friends or family members than to live forever like this. So as health workers, of course, we are quite essential. The balance of the essentiality is something which is personal. There is not a general rule that you can say. And you can talk about also, because for some people, poetry, beauty, flowers are essential. For others, they are the surplus of what comes afterwards. So to keep alive the need of the relationship, the need of touching, the need of body, the need of thinking with the body, to fight the over-conceptual, and everything has to be understood and explained, is something that I've always felt important. And of course, I feel is important also now. But how to keep it alive when you, in a time when the communication is done through Zoom? I mean, our talk would be different if we were sitting in the same room. Absolutely. You would understand very differently what I am saying or what I'm trying to explain. And I would probably understand your questions in a different way. So communication has to do with the impulses of the body, and not just with words, concepts, ideas, ideologies. And that is what we as theater artists work with. So our responsibility is to keep that language alive,
Right.
and to be able to use it as soon as possible. I've been thinking, if when we're allowed to open the theater, to do performances for maximum 9 spectators, because if I do a solo, then with 9 spectators, we can be in a room together. And so to do, can do performances for a family or for an office, or I don't know, something like that.
That's beautiful. Well, Julia, I don't want to take any more of your time. And, you know, it's so wonderful to see you and to listen to what you are doing. Please share my love to Eugenio and the rest of the company. I've been following, I just saw a 30-minute documentary on the history of the Odin the other day. It was wonderful to see it. And I have been following. I have noticed that you guys are putting out more material just to, you know, also to entertain us and to make us think, oh my goodness, I want to go back. So thank you very much for everything. And I'm going to share this video with you, and I will put it on a Google Drive, and hopefully with your email address I will be able to share it. Otherwise I will send it to you. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Best to you.
Keep well.